Hi, welcome to Tradition 6, an AA group. I never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Oh my gosh. So a group can't say publicly, can't say, they can privately, but they can't publicly say, we're putting our stamp of approval on this recovery house. We're putting our stamp of approval on this mental health institution. We're putting our stamp of approval on, we're going to say, this is what you should do. You should go to this place, or this place. Can't do that. Not publicly. Individuals within the group or the clique groups that are contained within each group, the little clique groups, they can say, this is or without saying, they can show by their actions, this is the group that we support. This is the recovery house that we support. This is a mental health institution that we refer all of our members to. But for at the level of press, radio, and films, we can't endorse uh, finance or lend the AA group name because then you're mixing like it just gets real money, property, and prestige. What is prestige? Hold on a minute. Let me see what does prestige mean? Okay, respect and admiration, status. If that happens, then like people's status, reputation, you know, widespread respect and admiration felt for someone or something on the basis of a perception, which is a way of thinking of their achievements or quality. I got a lot of notes on this. I need to read the long form of Tradition 6 in the back here real quick. Okay. Problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. Our primary spiritual aim is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. We think, therefore, that any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed, thus dividing the material from the spiritual. An AA group as such should never go into business. Secondary aids to AA, such as clubs or hospitals, which require much property or administration, ought to be incorporated and so set apart that if necessary, they can be freely discarded by the groups so they don't be dependent, right? Hence, such facilities ought not to use the AA name. Their management should be the sole responsibility of those people who financially support them. For clubs, AA managers are usually preferred, but hospitals, as well as other places of recuperation, ought to be well outside AA and medically supervised. While an AA group may cooperate with anyone, such cooperation ought never go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or implied. An AA group can bind itself to no one. Wow, that's a lot. This is the perfect ideal. Power struggles over money and control divert attention from recovery. So, no politics, no religion. Okay, tradition 6. Principle is singleness of purpose. Money is not primary. Principle of no endorsement. Page 57. Page. How do I got page 57? Principle of no endorsement. 157. Then in the principle is the principle of no endorsement. Sorry. Okay, so on page 157 it says this principle of no endorsement was put to a vital test. Some of the great. Okay. I don't know everything. The moment we saw that we had an answer for alcoholism, it was reasonable, or so it seemed at that time, for us to feel that we might have the answer to a lot of other things. The AA groups, many thought, could go into business, might finance an enterprise, whatever, any enterprise, whatever, in the total field of alcoholism. In fact, we felt duty bound to throw the whole weight of the AA name behind any meritorious cause. A meritorious cause is a deserving and worthy cause. Because naturally we want to do good stuff if we're working a program and serious about our recovery. We want to do good stuff out here. That's what the program is about. Here are some of the things we dreamed. Hospitals didn't like alcoholics. I don't know about now. Probably not so much either, even back then. So we thought we'd build a hospital chain of our own. People needed to be told what alcoholism was, so we'd educate the public. Even rewrite school and medical textbooks. We'd gather up derelicts, the homeless, from Skid Row, sort out those who could get well, make it possible for the rest to earn their livelihood in a kind of quarantined environment, confinement. You know, I think that still happens sometimes. Maybe these places would make large sums of money to carry on our other good works. What an ego feeding proposition. We seriously thought of rewriting the laws of the land and having it declared the alcoholics are sick people. No more would they be jailed. Judges would parole them in our custody. We'd spill AA into the dark regions of dope addiction and criminality. Look, there you go, all you strict AAers. Wow. We'd form groups of depressive and paranoid folks. The deeper the neurosis, the better we'd like it. It stood to reason that if alcoholism could be licked, so could any problem. Oh. Here's my note. Am I allowing material or financial concerns to gain priority over my personal spiritual needs and serenity? So, okay, still there's that balance. It occurred to us that we could take what we had into these factories and cause laborers and capitalists to love each other. Our uncompromising honesty might soon clean up politics. With one arm around the shoulder of religion and the other around the shoulder of medicine, we'd resolve their differences. Good Lord. Having learned to live so happily, we'd show everybody else why we thought our society of Alcoholics Anonymous might prove to be the spearhead of a new spiritual advance. Spearhead means the driving force, the front, or the beginning. We might transform the world. Oh my goodness. Yes, we have AA did dream those dreams. How natural that was, since most alcoholics are bankrupt idealists. Nearly every one of us had wished to do great good, perform great deeds, and embody great ideals. We are all perfectionists who, failing perfection, have gone to the other extreme and settled for the bottle and the blackout. Providence through AA had brought us within reach of our highest expectations, so why shouldn't we share our way of life with everyone? Let's break that paragraph down. Most idealists, most alcoholics are bankrupt idealists. What are bankrupt idealists? So if you read the next the sentence on further down, it says we went to the other extreme and settled for the bottle and the blackout. So bankrupt idealist. Let's see what idealist is. An idealist is someone who envisions an ideal world rather than the real one. Some consider idealists to be naive, impractical, and out of touch with reality. Idealists think that striving for perfection makes the world a better place, and the opposite is a realist. I'm an idealist. Less naive, but I do think I agree. So a bankrupt idealist, I don't know. Is that like someone who, I don't know, I lost everything in my life thinking and living that way? It's kind of a fantasy. Nearly every one of us wish to do great good, perform great deeds. Embody means to represent. So embody great ideals is represent perfection. So we tried to for perfection and failed and went to the opposite extreme. Providence, God, fate, or destiny through AA brought us within reach of our highest expectations. So I tried to live my life by these perfect ideals, and I tried to be perfect, and I tried to live up to them, and I failed until I was just crushed and bankrupt, and I just, I gave up. And so, um, we went to the bottle and a blackout, but then we come into AA and we finally realized that we can achieve some measure of these ideals by working the spiritual principles of the program. And then when you get to that point, it's like you want to share it with everyone, right? That's what it's saying. as Tanya sees it. Whereupon we tried AA hospitals. They all bogged down because you cannot put an AA group into business. Too many busybody cooks spoil the broth. I like that saying. Yep. Bogged means stuck. AA groups had their fling at education, and when they began to publicly whoop up the merits of this or that brand, people became confused. Let's break that sentence down. AA groups had their short period at education, is your fling, and then when they began to publicly whoop up the merits, means to loudly shout up how deserving something is, then people got confused. Did AA fix drunks or was it an educational project? Was AA spiritual or was it medical? Was it a reform movement? Reform means to improve. In consternation, we saw ourselves getting married to all kinds of enterprises, some good and some not so good. Consternation means feelings of anxiety or dismay, typically at something unexpected. So even though knew the AA's ideals were right and good and wanting to help people, and we can take this as an individual also. Even though my motives are right and good and my heart is in the right place, I cannot mix my recovery with I can't connect it, attach it, mix it, make it dependent on money, other people, places, or things. Everything will fail you, and eventually you're gonna get in a situation where you're gonna have to choose. So you'll see if two people get into recovery, especially in early recovery, we'll say a newcomer guy and a newcomer girl, they get into a relationship in early recovery and they become emotionally dependent on each other, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially dependent on another person for their recovery. One or both of them will relapse because they mixed their primary purpose and made it depend on someone or something else other than God. I think it's real important to say that. So, in confusion, we saw ourselves getting married to all kinds of enterprises, which is a project or undertaking, typically one that's difficult or requires effort. So we're getting connected to all kinds of projects, some good, some not so good. It's going to water down our recovery to spread ourselves like that. Watching alcoholics committed willy nilly to prisons or asylums, we began to cry. There ought to be a law. Okay. So we get in recovery, we see there's a way out, we finally have some understanding about what alcoholism is, and then we see that they're putting people away, committing people, locking them up in mental institutions, putting them in restraints like an animal in isolation, like an animal, treating humans as less than human. and asylums, which are other mental prisons where they're forced to take medication, etc. I don't know what they are nowadays, but back then it was pretty bad. And that's when they all said there should be a law against this is not right. Willy nilly is just any which way unplanned. They were rounding them up, rounding them up. Alcoholics were the scourge of society, throwing them in jail, throw them in a mental institution, locking them up anywhere as long as they weren't in society where people could complain about people. Because we know now, and we knew then when AA started, that there was a lot of trauma and stuff that happened to people that caused them to be alcoholic in the first place. So instead of compassion, consideration, and some kind of helping hand, society was just locking them away. It's a little bit different now. There's a lot more understanding than there used to be. I'll get off my high horse. AA's commits to thump tables in legislative committee rooms and agitated for legal reform. So they beat the tables and what is a legislative committee? Is appointed to investigate, delegate, and report on the lawmaking people. So they wanted to get laws made to reform, to campaign for the public to make them aware of the issue of what was going on with the abuse of alcoholics in the system, and hopefully things would change. Okay, that's what happened. I think AA was, and I don't know because I haven't looked up the history, but I really believe the A probably was huge, uh, a huge advocate for instrument in the change of the way society views alcoholics, and probably to a great degree uh, stopped a lot of the abuse of people who were, and let's say if you were abused, okay, if you're physically abused and you became an alcoholic just so that society, so that you could be beat up again by the cops and thrown into jail and be abused by society because you didn't know how to handle the abuse that you'd already been through, that's pretty bad. Trust and believe it. Ah, that made good newspaper copy, but little else. Oh, okay. So no change was happening, it was just being printed. We saw we'd soon be mired in politics. Oh my God, stuck in politics. Even inside AA, we found it imperative to remove the AA name from clubs and 12-step houses. Vitally important. Imperative means vitally important. Back then, when this book was written, it was vitally important. But now, it doesn't matter. It's commonplace. The literature, everything is all in the 12 step. There are all kinds of houses everywhere. Thank God. These adventures implanted a deep rooted conviction that in no circumstances could we endorse any related enterprise, no matter how good. We of Alcoholics Anonymous could not be all things to all men, nor should we try. That means these adventures, these situations that they went through uh, put in place the beliefs and the principles that we should not ever recommend any place publicly endorsing any place. That's how we got these principles by the stuff that happened. We of Alcoholics Anonymous could not be all things to all men. Okay, so then that's the principle of not trying to be all things to all people and keeping our singleness of purpose. And I'm going to throw a scripture in here, and I don't care what anybody says. So there's a scripture that says, if thine eye be single, thy whole body be full of light. And that means if I'm focused on the most important thing, if I'm keeping my eyes on the prize, which is a terminology that's been thrown around that's kind of, I feel like, taken out of context. In my way of thinking, in my context, it means if I keep my eyes on the prize, on focus on what's most important and keep that number one, which is God and my relationship with God, then all these other things will work out. If I divide my focus and my attentions to many different places, then I get my focus off of what's the most important thing, which is my relationship with God. Then I'm distracted away from my primary purpose, which is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve recovery. And I would like to continue achieving recovery because I see a lot of people, once they help someone achieve recovery, they cut them loose, they're done. We help them achieve sobriety. And so we're not going to follow up with them. that's not, that's not what I think we should. We should keep following up with people. I know it's hard, but I used to have a list and I don't do this anymore and I should, but I would call people in order, at least a person a day, and go around my list. I need to get back into that because my ego will say, well, they don't call me. Why should I call them? Or I called them last time. It's their turn to call me. So I got to fight my ego and pick up the phone whether I like it or not. That helps me. Okay. Okay. Years ago, this principle of no endorsement was put to a vital test. Let me make a, hold on, a note here. Principle of no endorsement. The thing is, even when you study all this stuff, even if you did know all of it, you probably forget some and maybe even need a refresher course. And if you know everything there is to know about Alcoholics Anonymous, you should be teaching it to someone else. But I learned by teaching, so that's why I do it. Years ago, this principle of no endorsement was put to a vital test. Some of the great distilling companies proposed to go into the field of alcohol education. Can you imagine that? Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch is going to educate people on the negative effects of alcohol. It would be a good thing, they believed, for the liquor trade to show a sense of public responsibility. They wanted to say that liquor should be enjoyed, not misused. They have that commercial, please drink responsibly, at the bottom. They wanted to say that liquor should be enjoyed, not misused. Hard drinkers ought to slow down, and problem drinkers, alcoholics, should not drink at all. That's what the alcohol companies wanted to say back in when 1952. Oh, Lord, can you imagine? In one of their trade associations, the question arose of just how this campaign should be handled. Of course, they would use the resources of radio, press, and films to make their point. But what kind of person should head the job? They immediately thought of Alcoholics Anonymous. If they could find a good public relations man in our ranks, why wouldn't he be ideal? He'd certainly know the problem. His connection with AA would be valuable because the fellowship stood in high public favor and hadn't an enemy in the world. Wow. At that time. At that time, the fellowship stood in high public favor and didn't have an enemy in the world. I wouldn't say it's true now. I'm going to have to turn the air on just a second. Can't breathe. Okay. Soon they'd spotted their man in AA with the necessary experience. Straightway he appeared at New York's AA headquarters. So the alcohol companies approached this man and said, "Hey, we want to pay you or use you. I mean, pay you probably, pay you to be a representative for Alcoholics Anonymous to tell everyone in the public that our company wants to put out this message that they should drink responsibly, okay?" So the guy doesn't know what to do, so he goes to central office that's in New York at that time and asked them there, is there anything in our tradition that suggests that I should not take a job like this one? The kind of education seems good to me and is not too controversial. Do you headquarters folks see any bugs in it? So a lot of groups will call headquarters if there's like something they can't figure out with their uh, in their group conscience, because headquarters has the combined knowledge of all the groups in the surrounding areas and everywhere. They all communicate. There's a lot of knowledge in the groups headquarters. At first glance, it did look like a good thing. Then doubt crept in. The association wanted to use our members' full name in all its advertising. He was to be described both as its director of publicity and as a member of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Of course, okay, so they were going to use this guy's first and last, middle and last name. And they were going to say he's the director of advertising and an AA member, and then connect them like that. So right there, you're putting the backing of Alcoholics Anonymous behind a member. I don't have any backing of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is my personal private study. I'm not endorsed or financed by anyone anywhere except for God. So if you got an issue with me, you need to take it up with him, because this is not my great idea. Sorry about that rant. Okay, so of course there couldn't be the slightest objection if such an association hired an AA member solely because of his public relations ability or his knowledge of alcoholism. But That wasn't the whole story. For in this case, not only was an AA member to break his anonymity at the public level, he was to link the name of Alcoholics Anonymous to this particular educational project in the minds of millions. It would be bound to appear that AA was now backing education, Liquor Trade Association style. So that's going to change the viewpoint of Alcoholics Anonymous in millions of people's minds, because you're associating AA with another business. The minute we saw this compromising fact for what it was, we asked the prospective publicity director how he felt about it. So they didn't see it at first. Even headquarters didn't see it. It took them some time. And then they went back to that guy and said, hey, what have you seen it from this viewpoint? Because everybody's got a different point of view and a different outlook. Luckily, the guy was open-minded enough to consider someone else's viewpoint besides his own. And he said, great guns, he said. Of course, I can't take the job. The ink wouldn't be dry on the first ad before an awful shriek would go up from the dry camp. So, the dry camp, I think, is, I don't know, is that a dry alcoholic is someone who doesn't drink but doesn't have a spiritual program of action. So I guess the people that quit drinking but don't really have a program would be the dry camp. They'd be out with lanterns looking for an honest AA to plump for their brand of education. Oh, okay, this dry camp is normal people, I guess. I don't know. AA would land exactly in the middle of the wet-dry controversy. Okay, so that's what it is. Teetotalers is what a dry camp is. So the people that are totally against alcohol. Okay? Some people, and then we still have that. Half the people in this country would think we signed up with the dries. The other half would think we joined the wets. What a mess. I wonder if that came about because of prohibition when they outlawed alcohol and people divided up into two groups, for or against. Nevertheless, we pointed out you still have a legal right to take this job. So it couldn't force the guy, obviously. You know, you can do what you want, but here's what we think, and we believe you'd be negatively affecting AA in this way. And he goes, I know that. He said, but this is no time for legalities. Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life, and it comes first. I certainly won't be the guy to land AA in big time trouble. Big time trouble, and this would really do it. So he knew, he had conviction in his heart. He understood with his mind, and his spirit had the right motive, all of them. So in my mind, okay, in your mind is right. You got the conviction in your heart to do the right thing, and your spirit lines up with that. He did the right thing. Concerning endorsements, our friend had said it all. We saw as never before. We could not lend the AA name to any cause other than our own. I think that's really good because I get overwhelmed. I'm an alcoholic. I get overwhelmed easy, and I just need to focus on, it's hard enough to focus on one thing at a time. I think that's all we need to do. Well, yeah. So I did my part, and you do yours. See you on step 7.